also problematic. Now, Thomas Ratliff is still out there saying, everybody go ahead and use C-scope, in spite of Bill 1406. David Anderson is the legal counsel for the TEA, the Texas Education Agency, and he announced on July 19th that he thinks the C-scope lessons can still be used because they're now part of the public domain. The state board, again, has reinstated those review panels, but here we are. It's still not passed yet. So after Dan Patrick obtained all the C-scope records, he wrote a letter to the Texas auditor and asked that they audit certain things, especially why did they pay a third party to produce C-scope when, number one, that third party did not have a legally binding contract and did not go through a bidding process. That is a no-no. You don't do that for state or governmental agencies. You have to go through that process. So something is awry here. Because some educators declared they would continue to use C-scope, Dan Patrick filed Senate Bill 41 in the summer session. It would have made C-scope illegal. However, time was short. It didn't get out of committee. It's a good bill. I've looked at it. Hopefully it will pass in 2015. About the only thing that has changed about C-scope is they have a new website that says nothing about nothing, and then it has the name change. We knew that was going to happen, didn't we? Now, why is everybody in a snit over all of this? Well, by definition, it's an online curriculum management tool. There are academic deficiencies in math, science, and English, and the quality of the curriculum is very poor. The assessments are just, it's amazing how they're worded. I mean, some of them are just so bad. And I've seen left-wing bias in there. There are a lot of people who've been charging that there's an agenda-driven bias in the social studies content that promotes a negative view of America and a positive view of Islam. And although a lot of the lessons may have been changed, I have to ask, why did they ever exist in the first place? Why was a poorly written content out there? Why was a biased curriculum out there? So, when C-scope was leased to a school district, all school personnel were required to sign a gag order so that no one, including parents, could view the materials. And today, students even tell us that they still can't take the textbook home, and sometimes they can't even take their worksheets home. The textbooks were removed from the classroom and classrooms, and worksheets were printed out instead. By the way, when parents can't see all instructional materials, it is a violation of Texas Education Code 26.006. C-scope developers said teachers needed a curriculum management system for planning teaching units. That's blatantly false. Let's address the anti-American claim. This belief that the lessons are anti-American is not simply a conspiracy theory. Joseph Stalin, whom we all know, said this: America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold: its patriotism, its morality, and its spirituality. If we can undermine those three areas, America will collapse from within. Since the early part of the 20th century, communists, cultural Marxists, and other such left-wing groups have been targeting American education, labor, entertainment, and religion, our main institutions. I don't need to tell you that when you turn on TV, you see all that happening. Have a fun day. Turn on channel 66. At least that's what we get in Dallas. Turn it on, and when you see sitcoms from going back in the 50s and 60s, 70s, and you think about it as of today, you can see how gradually they were moving us to the left. It's just amazing. You cannot ever watch it the same way that you did before when you're watching that. Well, today we're seeing the fruits of their labor and the moral and religious decay in our nation, the dumbing down of our citizens, and loss of our constitutional freedoms. There are 45 communist goals for the overthrow of the U.S. They were published in January 1963 in the Congressional Record. If you want to read the book called The Naked Communist, it was by Cleon Skousen. Read that. I mean, you can go online and Google it anywhere. But you can also go online, and I'll try to remember to put the link in there on my website, because I write a bit on the front page. There's a lot of this information. You can go online and you can see all 45 of those goals. I have just a few of them here tonight that just do relate just to education. The first one is get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. What do you think that means? Dumb down the curriculum. I didn't write this. Read the Communist Manifesto. Get control of teachers' associations. So how about the NEA? When I was in the NEA years ago, it was not a union organization. I joined it so I wouldn't have to join the union organization. Today, it is strictly left-wing, radical. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines. You're going to see things. I mean, I even saw things in Dallas ISD in the fine arts where it was porno in there. And if you go into Common Core today, I'm writing an article about it right now, you will see that some of the books that they are giving for students to read in 11th grade are pure pornographic, and they want the kids to read it in the classroom. I cannot even talk about it in a speech, nor would I write about it. It's so bad. Here's the last one. Now, no, the big thing today is same-sex marriage. And people say, well, why don't people get married to people they love? That's not the issue. It is not the issue at all. The issue is right here. That's the whole issue, is trying to change our nation from within by changing the traditional family. And a traditional family, they come together, they're promoting each other. Your goal is your children. When the family is broken up, your main focus is the government. They did it in Hungary, and they found the same thing that happens now was happening in Hungary, because they started doing this in the high schools and the junior highs, and the kids became violent, they became thieves, they were dumbed down. Their parents they had no respect for. They had no respect for any authority, including the churches. Another is the Bible, the religion, and look down here. The reason I put this on here is because it seems to be such an issue in our schools about even a child mentioning the word Jesus, or maybe praying over his food at lunch. That is bizarre. That's a First Amendment right. I don't care what property that child is on. That's right. This is the communist goal. I'm sorry, but it's the communist goal.
That's right.
Vladimir Lenin understood how important education is for the long-term success of communism. He said, give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. I'm sure many of you have heard that before. It's alarming that Americans today are primarily ignoring, by and large, education and what's happening in the school and the grave consequences. Instead, they're focusing on all other kinds of issues. There are basically 4 things we must focus on. One is in national security, border control, education, and I don't mean from economy. I'm talking about from ideology, and then from the economy side. Now take your flyer that I gave you and flip on the other side and look at the traditional versus progressive teaching. Most of you probably did, I'm looking at your ages in here, many of you probably looked at the, no, I'm not saying anything about it, I did traditional education, and all of our founding fathers did too, and our private schools did, but our education, public education has not done traditional teaching in so long. Anyhow, when you look at that, you can go through and you can look at all of this at home, because when you see on there, you will see why it's so terribly dangerous. This model was created by Marxists and communists to gradually change our Western culture with its Christian values and traditional family to one of corruption and decadence, so that America will fall to totalitarianism without ever having a bloody revolution. Look over to the right and look at Common Core and Cisco. You'll notice that they are progressive education. Look to the very far right and you will see all those code words. You know the code words, political correctness, it's a whole series of things there that you will recognize cultural Marxism, and all of those are code words under cultural Marxism, under communism. You can go on the website, you can pull up a lot of this and find it as well. And again, back on my website. Now let's look at John Dewey. John Dewey, I heard about when I was taking my courses in education. I didn't take that. I took very few until I did my PhD because I was in music and performance and in piano and organ. And so we really didn't get the indoctrination. It was just beginning, and you know, I was seeing it when I got into the College of Education. And I thought those were the nuttiest people I'd ever heard of. They were telling me we were going to be having living sidewalks, and everybody was going to be living in high-rises, and we were all going to be living in a small area. I understand today that's Agenda 21. So John Dewey was a father of progressive education. He was a left-wing educator and a philosopher who believed that traditional religion and education were obstacles to change. He wanted the classroom to be used to drive political change and social change. Today, the radical ideas of John Dewey are steeped throughout public education, throughout this entire nation. And in fact, when I went on one of the ISDs, and I don't remember if it was Red Oak or Waxahachie, but one of them on there mentioned John Dewey. So every time we have reforms, they look at John Dewey and they say, well, what would John Dewey do? And we have reform, and so we just keep reproducing the same problem. We need to get rid of John Dewey's everything and start back to traditional education. I want to show you something that he said. I'm going to leave it up here for just a minute because I want you to think about this. The children who know how to think for themselves spoil the harmony of the collective society that is coming, where everyone would be interdependent. That means you cannot be dependent to think for yourself. You're supposed to depend on each other, and you're supposed to depend upon the government. The key to progressive teaching is the focus on project-based learning and social constructivism. Now, those are two terms, and you will see that in the handout that I gave you there. Go back and Google that if you want to know more about it, because those are crucial to understanding what C-scope is, what Common Core is, what progressive teaching is. Let's talk about project-based learning first. It's a group think, and it has a group grade. And every time I pull up these lessons with C-scope, I keep looking in there, and the lessons are just saying, well, it's all about group. This group does this group does this group does this, and they all come together in some kind of consensus and teaching each other. Let me tell you, I had this nutty professor when I first went into my doctorate. I actually started my doctorate in music, and then for some reason I went ahead and switched. Well, here I get this college professor who is a nutcase, and the first thing he says to me is go into the classroom and put my kids in groups and have them teach each other. So that didn't work very well, and they were about to fail out there. Let's look at constructivism. Constructivism is where the kids aggressively question the social, moral, and religious standards taught to them by their parents. They basically are pitting the kids against each other. Pitting the kids against the parents. Let me run on over. I've got 5 minutes left here, so we're going to have to cut it short here. I think most of you know by now that the colleges of education are left-wing, and that's our problem. That is the real problem here. I want to show you maybe just a few of these. This is one of the things they were showing, and this is the ladder showing communism, but the lowest rung is capitalism. It goes up to communism. Here's another one where they're calling Paul Revere a dope peddler. Why would they ever be referring to that? I don't care if you take it out of context. Here they're telling the students to create a socialist flag. Here they're talking about the Boston Tea Party as being a terrorist attack. Keep in mind, they're looking at this from a British viewpoint, not from an American viewpoint. We don't want to be teaching from a British viewpoint. And this goes into telling the kids that it's about terrorism. It was not, again, it's this mind indoctrination. Islam, they asked the kids to chart a pilgrimage to Mecca, but they never mentioned a thing about Israel. Is that anti-American? Is that anti-Jewish? Is that anti-Christian? All these things that we've been looking at. Here's some of the test questions. Which of the following has been a benefit of globalization? Well, I'm sorry, but standard of living is not a benefit here. And then, back here, look at the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers are a group trying to achieve equal rights. And then we look over here, it's very negative about the landscape in East Texas. Bob is from East Texas. We go over there all the time. I don't see this. And so all of this is just, it's a mind indoctrination. This, I want to tell you real quick and then we'll wrap it up. I tried to see about the alignment. So I went in August before they took this down. And then I went into the TEKS. Now, keep in mind that TEKS are simply curriculum standards, so don't let that mess up your mind. It's curriculum standards. So I looked in there, and this is the world history, and this is the STEM question. The student understands the historical origins of contemporary economic systems and the benefits of free enterprise and world history. And then I just summarized all these together. Look at the historical origins and characteristics of the enterprise system, communism, socialism, and fascism. Here was the question that they asked though. They said, tell how each of these work in a perfect world. That's not what they asked to do. This is not what the curriculum standards said to do. And we know that there's no perfect world out there. So this lesson did not at all do what these standards told it to do. Then you go over here to the next one. If you right down here, it says to formulate generalizations, and then you go into 20th century free market economies compared to communist command economies. One of the things that they especially wanted the students to do in here is to study the free enterprise, which an alternate name is capitalism. And again, you see right down here where they're talking about free enterprise. Okay, we'll go back up here. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up here because I know we want to take some questions. I won't go into the money trail. There are a lot of very difficult things there. We'll just leave it to say that we don't know what's going to come out of this. Where we're going with it, we'll soon know. So is C-scope really needed? So far, we haven't found that it's going to be needed, that life is going to be just fine without it. I appreciate your inviting me here this evening again. What can you do? I would suggest that, number one, go onto my website. There are materials there. Don't wait for anyone, including politicians, your neighbor, anyone. Take charge yourself. And I'm here if you want to invite me to talk to any of your groups, meet in your dens and talk about it, help you look over the textbooks. I'm happy to do that. Maybe in a few minutes, we have a group that's here tonight. Alice Linehan and Merrill Hope are with us, and they have some very interesting information that maybe if you could get them to tell you about that, because that goes right along with what I'm talking about, how you go out and how you take charge yourself, other than just saying, hey, here I am. They have a very definite plan for you. Thank you very much.
Visit with Alice and her group called Women on the Wall. Alice is just an activist mom who's concerned about what's happening in her children's lives and the lives of our children and grandchildren and what they're being taught today, which is a lot contrary to what we started with our founding fathers. Alice, do you want to stand up? Well, Alice is standing up. She's just not very tall. Alice, that's Alice Linehan. You'll want to know her. She's all over the place and spreading the truth.
We're going to ask our two superintendents to come back. They're going to talk about curriculum real quick. We're going to do some questions and answers.
We'll make this as quick as possible because I believe really the best dialogue may come from the Q&A time. But I just want to thank Carol. She did a fabulous job in explaining some of the things we've been dealing with as well as we've been moving through this last legislative session. And I just want the folks in the audience to know that when Carol was mentioning Senate Bill 1474 and Senate Bill 1406, that Scott and I have a common support for both of those Senate bills, that we feel strongly that transparency is needed. We welcome the SBOE or whichever stakeholders are involved in those processes to review the materials that are in our school, and that we feel that those things are important for transparency. Also support what Carol was saying about local control and these decisions being in the hands of our school board and communities, and specifically our teachers in deciding how best to teach the different TEKs that Carol mentioned in our classroom. They are the experts, and we've hired some fantastic folks over the years in WISD, just like Red Oak has. And like you heard Scott say, Red Oak is over 100 years old, and obviously Waxahachie is as well. And for all that time, we've asked our teachers to create the activities and lessons for our kids, and why would we stop doing that now? We believe those things are the core job of the work that our teachers do in our classroom. We'd like to see that continue. I just want to make sure that everyone in the audience understands we're going to be as transparent as possible that both of our districts have used C-Scope in the past. We obviously went to sessions at our Region Service Center, and both districts had different reasons, obviously, for looking at the curriculum management tool for our schools because we have different needs. As Carol pointed out, it has gone through a name change. But I want to make sure that the folks here tonight understand the different components and how we're using them, because we do believe that there has been many self-inflicted wounds by the group in how the rollout has gone and the different things that they provided for the school districts. You heard Carol mention really all three components in her speech. The first component I want to talk about is the documents that Carol's mentioning that lay out the TEKs for a school year, I guess is the best way to say it. I've heard researchers say that if you teach every TEK that's out there, that it would take 23 years of education. And I've heard different numbers there, but give or take a year or two. And as you know, we have them at most 13 years. And so the part that we liked best about going with this curriculum management tool was that it would provide our teachers a framework. So they would know from August 27th through June 6th what they had to get in and cover to ensure that their grade level TEKs were in the hands of the kids, and also so they know at what level of mastery that they would have to obtain in order to make sure that they were grade ready, and in this case, to give it a name, TEK ready for the next grade level. And we believe, both districts, that was an important component for our teachers. The parts that Carol's mentioning about lessons, I want to make clear to the audience tonight, is neither district has ever required the lessons in our schools. They were strictly a resource, and like with anything our teachers can use in our schools, we ask them to review them and do what's best in the kids' interests of our schools. And like Carol said, the lessons are no longer a part of the new TRS. It's called the TEKS resource system, but they are, like she said, in public domain. But again, I want to stress, we support the review. Waxahachie ISD even has a teacher that's serving on that review process of the social studies lessons. We felt it was that important that our community had a representative. And she's here tonight, and she was introduced earlier. Chelsea Sanchez is serving on the grade 3 review committee for the social studies lessons, and we welcome the review of all the lessons. And then the last piece, the third component, is the assessment piece. And I know Red Oak and Waxahachie do different things with that. Neither district requires the assessments to be used in our schools. Red Oak even takes it a step further with using pieces of them. We use pieces of them. We don't use them in their entirety. We make them available, but we ask our teachers to review them and the questions as well. And Red Oak actually takes it a step further, and their teachers even have broken them down and used different pieces in the assessments. So I just wanted to clarify how the different assessments are used and the different components with the lesson plans and then the scope and sequence documents. So Red Oak and WISD use the scope and sequence documents. We use pieces of the assessment component, but the lesson plans are not required in our school districts. I figured you were gonna say time on me, Morris. All right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, John and Scott. Okay, I know it's hard on y'all. Y'all are sitting in those chairs. We get to get up and stand up and talk and everything else, and y'all get to sit there for 2 hours. So it's kind of hard on you, and I apologize for the inconvenience. However, we had a long program tonight with 3 very good speakers. Let's give these speakers a big round of applause. Like I said earlier, we wanted to dedicate tonight in education, and I think we all learned something. And we're getting ready to do our question and answer session now. So I had asked you, those who were here late, I have these little cards. We pass these cards out. If you have filled out a card, we're going to take those cards at this time, and we're going to compile those so we can let these 3 guest speakers answer these questions.
Morris,
Yes, sir.
since it's baseball playoff time, can we have a 30-second 7th inning stretch?
Is that all right with you guys? All right, 30 seconds. 28. While we're stretching, I'd just like to say that you guys get something to drink or eat, whatever you want, to stretch for about 24 more seconds. But we had a preachers conference here recently, and we had asked the area preachers to come and speak on 501c3 here recently. We had numerous preachers attend, ministers, and it was a good turnout, and we're going to have another one in August. If any of you who would like to, please contact your ministers and ask them, or just tell them that we're going to have this conference again. We would be glad to have them come. And what we do is we're talking about 501c3s, which are churches, and which is it educates our clergy what they can and can't say behind the pulpit. This is real important because we got elections coming up. Other churches are doing it. If your church is not, then maybe you need to look into this. One of the people who is one of our great ministers is John Lawson. John Lawson is in our group. Would you stand up, John? Thank you for coming tonight. Yes, sir. John preaches the gospel, and he also is totally against abortion. This is a very important thing in his life. While we take our seats, 30 seconds.
I didn't need for it to go that long. I just wanted to pop my back.
I know, I understand.
Oh.
Anybody else have a card that we can pick up? Or do you need a blank? Here's the blank. Right here.
Nelson. Your little light's still red, so I guess it's still charging.
I heard that a couple months
You see that full-grown man up there?
Yeah.
That's the welcome in the cooler. It's already a third gun.
While we're getting our cards together, I mentioned Bishop John Lawson a while ago. He has a DVD out. It's really good. If you haven't watched this, it's about black genocide and how abortion is ruining our young people and their future. If you get a chance, talk to Bishop John Lawson, and he can help you get one of these. It's really good. If you, this applies, it's addressed as black, but it's everybody. Everybody's aware of abortion. Those of you who feel like I do, you really need to watch this. This is very informative on abortion. Okay, I think we're almost ready to do our questions and answers. And one thing I would like for everyone to do, while we're in the back, I'd like to, if we can, all sit down and let's give our speakers full respect at their answers and also treat them with respect. And let's keep everything down to a slow roar. Sometimes emotions get wild, I know mine does too. But we can learn more by being cool and calm and collected than we can by being loud and perhaps disrespectful to our three guests. So let's show them some respect tonight, and we're going to start with the questions and answers. Marty, would you like to read the first one, please?
Yeah. I do the iMessage, but I don't text.
Hello.
Hello. It was woken up now, haven't it?
We're awake now.
Here's your back off. Does that sound a little better now?
That's good.
Okay. Math and science education is failing nationally. What are you doing to correct this trend?
Well, what we'll do is, you have the mic. If any of you want to answer this question, just go right here.
You're right, there's definitely difficulty in the math and, you're right, there's definitely difficulty in the math and science curriculum. But I know that we have a group of very dedicated educators and very well prepared that are trying to implement additional things into the math and science curriculum so that we can make sure that our kids are prepared. For example, I know that some of our classes actually that have 2 periods of math, or some of our grades have 2 periods of math as opposed to 1 for those that aren't getting it properly. And so we're doing things of that nature, trying to make sure we have good science labs, make sure they have an opportunity to participate in science labs and other types of curriculum. We have a junior high math initiative. That certainly seems like a place where we are having problems with math nationally. And we're trying to do that as well as get additional math teachers in to help with the problems.
I just wanted to add, Carol mentioned earlier about getting involved. I just wanted to make sure everyone in the room knew that the math standards for the state just went through a revision process. And also, all school districts in Texas are going through an adoption of new science and math materials in the spring. So this is a very, very important year for the future of science and math instruction in our schools. And so we will be vigilant and diligent in what we take to our school boards for approval. You heard Carol talk about how some of the oversight of that has, on her timeline, gone by the wayside. But we will keep our school boards and citizens and teachers involved in that process, with the teachers assisting with those decisions as far as what's best for the kids in our schools.
Our scores in math and reading nationally have plummeted so that we score way down on the bottom among developed nations. Our kids can study themselves blind. They can go home and they can study math. The problem is how they're being taught math. I'm telling you, the way new math has been taught, I couldn't even add or subtract that way. As a musician, I tend to be very strong mathematically, analytically. I couldn't do math the way these kids are being taught to do it. And if you will look at some of the Common Core, it's not about getting a right answer, it's about the process. So when I say Common Core, keep in mind that I'm talking about progressive education because that's the platform. So I think we need to go back and see what we're teaching these kids, not how many hours they're spending it, but it's spending in it, but how and what we're teaching them in math. We don't need these kids building our bridges at the rate they're going.
Okay, this is a rather long question, stretching from here to forward. Since Article 7 of the Texas Constitution specifies the purpose of public schools is supposed to be a general diffusion of knowledge being essential to the presentation of the liberties and rights of the people, it appears that the public schools are considerably failing, maybe that's what this is, with voter turnout rates equivalent to a grade of 3 to maybe 60%. How do you plan to increase the civic turnout of your graduates, and what do athletic programs do to preserve rights and liberties when votes are lower than football scores?
Okay, let me see if I can kind of dissect this question a little bit. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes. You know, our board is a duly elected body by the citizens of the school district. 7 members, they're duly elected. People know when elections are. It's not a secret, they're well posted, and people have to decide to show up and vote and do their civic duty. I believe that we have a good board in place in Red Oak. I was a little bit confused about the board not being involved in curriculum selection, because I know our board is, and I'm sure Waxahachie's is as well. But we work hard in government. We have Freedom Week. We make sure that they have opportunities to learn about the Constitution and talk to them about voting and the importance of being involved. We don't tell them how to vote, we tell them about being involved. We give them opportunities to sign up when they turn 18 to vote. So there's opportunities, but we have to make sure that there's definitely opportunities, but we have to make sure that we continue that within our school system, because the character and education and the requirements that should be for citizens to take ownership of their rights is very important. And ownership of the school system. The school belongs to the community, and we want to continue that. There's definitely nothing that we want to hide, and we want to make sure that people that want to get out and support school board members or run for the school board or have questions, come and ask.
We can tell our students, we can tell our citizens to go out and to vote. We have to instill something that is so passionate in them that they will go out, and you cannot keep them from voting. This starts in early years, it starts in elementary. Children must be taught patriotism. I can't say that as I see across the nation, that our kids are being taught patriotism. When they're being given questions like I showed you up here, that is not teaching those children patriotism. All it's teaching them is to doubt the United States and to doubt America and to doubt who we are. We're the greatest nation on earth. We should be teaching those children from day one. They should know this from early on. Some schools don't even, I don't know what these gentlemen's, their ISDs are, but some of the schools don't even allow the children to have the Pledge of Allegiance. This is ridiculous. You do it? Every day. Hallelujah. Give them a and a moment of silence. That's even better. So, we must start and not just tell kids. It has to be inbred. It has to be in their souls. Homeschoolers are teaching this. Homeschoolers are so loyal, so patriotic, that they are out absolutely walking the neighborhood. When I was working with Pastor Broden and Pastor back here, we had homeschoolers who were going out in the neighborhoods. They knew the Constitution. That was their civic lesson. We've got to do this same thing in public education.
Lord, could I say something very quickly? My name is John Hawkins. I am a school board member for Red Oak ISD. We appreciate you guys inviting us, but Dr. Haynes, I'm sorry. You are painting these Christian, patriotic men with a very broad brush, and you guys are sitting there cheering, and you've not been to Red Oak ISD, you've not been to Waxahachie ISD. If your kids are in those schools, you know these things are not going on, but you're applauding this woman who is painting these Christian, patriotic men with this broad brush.
She said specifically that she was not dressing.
I don't agree with that at all. Your perspective is wrong.
She never accused these gentlemen that I know of anything. She's saying what's going on in the Texas school system.
Absolutely.
Three men against one woman.
Yeah.
Hey, it's easy for us to, obviously, one thing that was important to me is I tried to tell y'all who I was. I am a Christian. Now, when you put C-scope and communism together and make me think I'm a communist, I have an issue with that, because I'm a God-fearing Christian. And I'm going to go to church in the morning, I'm going to pray for all of us in this room.
Amen, brother.
To get something together. I'm not sure what. But, you know, I read chapter 6 of Luke before I came here tonight because I was concerned this is the way it was going to turn out. And you know what? I think the problem that we all have is sometimes looking for the speck in our brother's eye, we don't see the plank in our own. And that's just the way I feel.
All right, you get the next question then. How do parents know if their child's teacher is using C-scope lessons? How do parents know if their child's teacher is using C-scope lessons?
It's very simple, just ask.
Do you send a letter out?
Yes, do you notify the parents?
Parents have a responsibility too. It's not all about just notifying everything. Parents have responsibilities, just like I have responsibilities for my 3 children that I'm raising. And I know what they're being taught. And I have 2 successful girls in college that are doing well. And I have one that's a second grader that's learning.
Parents cannot be in the classroom every day with everything that you're teaching.
With email.
But I don't care with email. It's still, they're just as busy as you are. Why not, if you know that this is a controversial issue, why not make sure that you inform the parents so the parents can put their information back to you whether they do want it or not?
Well, we've tried to inform them in board meetings. We've tried to put information out. It may not be where you are, but it's in many places in the public or in our school district. We're going to try to inform. We're not trying to hide anything, even though that may be the way you feel. We're trying to do the right thing and trying to educate kids. And that's it. It's not a bunch of smoke and mirrors. Well, come on.
Excuse me, I just want to say real quick, we have to be very careful, and one of the things with Women on the Wall that we are very careful about is that there are a lot of people in education who are really wonderful people and who are great educators. And in Texas, we do have the strongest state standards in the nation. Our TEKS are better than any state in the nation. And so we come at each other in an adversary way sometimes, but there's a lot of people in education, from the teachers to the parents to the superintendents, who are being used and don't even realize it. When I had a meeting at the Region Service Center at Region Service Center 11, the curriculum director, I said, I've got this PowerPoint slide that says C-Scope and it has professional development, Linda Darling Hammond. And I said, did Linda Darling Hammond write this? And she said, no, she didn't write it. You don't understand. And for those of you that don't know, Linda Darling Hammond is very involved at the national level with the Common Core standards. She's very involved with Arnie Duncan. And so she said, you don't understand. The writers of C-Scope, Linda Darling Hammond, she is their, it's her philosophy of education that they're using, the project-based learning and the way, her philosophy of education. Linda Darling Hammond is an avowed humanist who believes in equalizing America in the world through education. There are a lot of wonderful teachers in the state of Texas who benefit, who have been told that they have to have a scope and sequence and these assessments because they need that. There are a lot of people who are being used and don't even realize it. And so I don't think the people in here who work at Red Oak and Waxahachie are communists and socialists and trying to indoctrinate our children. I don't think that at all. But I think that they are being given products, curriculum products, by people who don't have the same intention and who aren't from Texas and go to church at, whatever church we go to. And so one of the things that I'm asking people to do is to go into the classroom and say, can I see? Just like you're saying. Parents, it is our responsibility. Grandparents who come to these meetings, it's your responsibility to go to your child that has your grandchild and say, you need to go into the classroom and say, can I see? And not to attack the teacher, because the teacher is being bound by having to use this curriculum management system. Curriculum management system.
Are you using Common Core at all, or any C-Scope material?
Okay, here's where we are. We need to do the rest of these questions. We got a lot of
Sorry.
questions up here.
I just wanted to bring it up. I didn't want it.
Let's hold all this down until after we get the questions answered.
Yeah.
And then we'll open it up as a final thing because people are getting tired. And is that okay with everybody? Is everybody okay on board with that? Okay, all right, let's go through the questions and then we'll open it up, okay? I think Linda is going to have a few things in between this, and then I want to talk a little bit about our future. But right now we're going to do some questions, okay? I'm going to ask the next one. Who recommends C-Scope to the school board? Then who approved it? Being funded, did they see the lessons before approving?
There's really three questions here. The superintendent, I've been on the job since April, so just to make sure we understand our timeline here, we're in our third year of using the scope and sequence piece, and it was recommended by our superintendent to the board for approval because the Region Center required us to include what's called a doula, which is a licensing agreement, and the board approves then a purchase order based on the dollar amount that the system costs per student. And did we see any lessons before approving? We saw sample materials because we were allowed to look at the different components and had different teams review them. Really all three components, I guess, is the best way to say it. But I just want to stress again, remember what I said a minute ago, we've never required the lessons in either one of our school districts. I can't stress that enough. So the parts that we scrutinized were the scope and sequence, the year-at-a-glance documents. And again, we only use the assessment pieces based on the data in our school district and the areas that our kids are struggling in, what I'll call heat zone mapping based on STAR test results or gaps in learning. So those pieces we even review with teams to make sure that the questions are at the appropriate level and appropriate for what was being taught in the classroom. I know Red Oak even has a more stringent review process than the ones they use than even we do, and I'm looking into that as well for our school district.
You know, at Red Oak, before any of the curriculum was approved for the district, and I think this was back in, '08. Teachers reviewed the curriculum. It was open, it was discussed at the board meeting. The board actually, after a review of the teachers and looking at what's going on in other school districts, approved. It was recommended to the board by the panel of, that included teachers and included administrators, and I believe some parents actually sat on that panel. And in doing that, it was recommended to the board at that time. It is a board approval item. The funding obviously goes in the budget, which is the board approved as well. So everything went through a vetting process and went all the way through board approval from actually having teacher groups look at it at each level prior to it actually moving forward.
I also like to reiterate that, again, we're in favor of Senate Bill 1474 and the process that you heard earlier with any new district initiative in the areas of curriculum being reviewed and vetted by the community for feedback even, and at the level of the school board. The irony of that Senate bill is we were already doing those things. So I can't stress enough that we were gathering feedback and asking for teachers and parents and really vetting the different things that we use, and not just when we looked at CSCO, but anything we use. I don't know if we've done a good job explaining tonight that we don't just use one resource in our schools, we use many. We want our teachers to have you know, a buffet of things to choose from as far as meeting the needs of the kids. And we think all those things should be reviewed and scrutinized at the level that I believe everyone in this room is asking. I just can't stress enough that we're for that. We want that in our communities.
Okay, next question. The reason we're doing a questions and answers is just going to keep a little bit of civility, because we know this can be a contentious issue for some people, so this way we don't get kind of wild. Anyways, are you concerned about the curriculum management system collecting data on both teachers and students?
You know, with everything going on at the national level, obviously I'm concerned about it. And I want to make sure that what we do have is protected and that it's limited to the people. There's FERPA, there's requirements that we have to